Hello, thank you for joining us this Thursday evening. This is the Guild Complex Presents Exhibit B number 4. The images you just got to look at are from the Awakenings Gallery. We're going to be hearing a little bit more about the gallery later in the show. But first, I'm your host and co-curator, Ian Eric Wichkevich. You'll notice that this month I'm alone in my hosting duties, although my usually hosting partner, James Stewart, does reside here over my left shoulder as well as always, in my heart. Jim won't be joining us for this show because he's recently become a new parent, so congratulations to him from everyone at the show. I only feel bad that his baby will have to compete for his attention with me, and what does a baby have that I don't have? Anyways, before the show starts, we wanted to put in a content warning for our audience. There will be some work presented tonight that deals with some sensitive subject matter, including sexual violence. We are going to provide some links to hotlines in the chat. If you are feeling upset during the show, please feel free to reach out to any of those numbers. Also, just be mindful of yourself, of your mind. If you need to take a moment to step away, please do. Just take care of yourself. And first, before we continue, we got to get a shout out to our glorious host for these events, the Guild Literary Complex of Chicago. Since 1989, the Guild Literary Complex has served the Chicago community through innovative programming that highlights the intersections of marginality, the power of community, the impact of arts and activism. They build on Chicago's rich literary traditions through vibrant storytelling and radical inclusion, advancing access to and from the margins. The Guild Literary Complex supports and encourages voices of all backgrounds and experiences to tell their truths, whether they are literary powerhouses or talented newcomers. They view literature as a vehicle of connectivity and aim to merge seemingly disparate groups across Chicago's 50 wards. If you're so inclined and have the means, they, like many other nonprofit organizations, could use some extra help. So we will be dropping links to their donate page as well as their other pages. Please give them a look. It's an awesome organization. They've done awesome work beyond just this incredible show that you're seeing right now. And lastly, before we started, as usual, we wanted to make a land acknowledgement statement. First, I would like to acknowledge the fact that we're on stolen land, the result of acts of genocide perpetrated by white settlers in the United States of America against the land's indigenous inhabitants. I recognize the complexity of myself, a non-native person, doing so, but I do it with an open heart as an act of solidarity. This land we refer to as Chicago was, is, and forever will be that of the Potawatomi, Kickapoo, Peoria, Miami, and Sioux. There's a tendency sometimes, I think, to treat these sorts of statements as a verbal commemorative plaque. But this statement is not only a historical acknowledgement, it is an acknowledgement of the continuing process of colonialism and erasure, and mostly a call for self-reflection. Indigenous people continue to work as leading voices in the struggle against white supremacy, police brutality, and as role models in the fight for environmental justice. To find out more about the land that we're on, as well as help with crafting a land acknowledgement statement of your own, please check out the links we're going to drop in the chat to the Native Lands app. It's a really great resource, and I'd love for you to check it out. Anyways, we've got a giant packed show for you. A couple video essays, a couple readings. We're going to hear from Mary Cerney, Thea Matthews, Abigail Chabitnoy, as well as hearing from Laura Kincher of Awakenings. But first, we're going to hear from Benji Hart. Benji is a Chicago-based author, artist, and educator. Their essays and poems have appeared in numerous anthologies, and their commentary has been published at Teen Vogue, The Chicago Reader, The Advocate, as well as others. They've led workshops for organizations and at academic institutions internationally and facilitated convenings for groups like Law for Black Lives, National Bailout, and Organized Communities Against Deportations. Their performances have been featured at CA2M, Madrid, Museo Universitario del Chopo, Mexico City, and BRIC in New York, as well as elsewhere. They have held fellowships with the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, McDowell, and are the recipient of the 3 Arts Award in Teaching Arts. Some of us at the Bump Sophisticate have worked previously with Benji, and we are super happy to be able to present their work here at Exhibit B. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you soon.
Hello, my name is Benji Hart. I'm coming to you all from Rogers Park on the north side here in Chicago. I want to give a huge thank you to Alex and Exhibit B and all the folks working together to host this event tonight for inviting me. I'm deeply appreciative. I'm going to keep it pretty brief and read two poems. The first I originally wrote for Trans Day of Resilience back in 2017, and it's titled The Limits of Language. When Sylvia Rivera, a Boricua, from the Arawak Borinquen, named for the island pre-colonization, trans woman, and Marsha P. Johnson, a Black, from the European caste system, signifying nadir, most depraved, trans woman, founded Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, 1970. They took on a word now considered offensive. They were out all night, at the bars, in the street, before some scholar coined the term transgender, and needed nothing bestowed on them to know what ought to be done and do it. They would later inaugurate a makeshift shelter, infamously dropping an old refrigerator from the second-story window on a murder of officers attempting to evict them. This is to say, we are each a new symbol, requiring, should we long for it, its own definition. To choose blackness, knowing blackness was chosen to keep you quiet. To worship again that which was designated profane for the very fact of its holiness. To get up, to dress oneself, walk outside, all without needing a name for any of it. To be subversion's mascot, long before becoming its lover. To inhabit futures in a bedroom of ghosts. To acknowledge language as another border. What is the word for belonging to the land? What is the word for ancestor moving in my throat? To know what one is celebrating, one must also know what one is mourning. The sign for everything not yet imagined. Back teeth biting down on a tongue before it forms the phrase. I share this with you because you are even now a part of it. Lips curled into the sound for world after this one. What letter can stand in for a jail cell left open, empty and ringing as a speechless mouth? The second poem I'm going to read is an excerpt, a poem that comes from a larger piece, the title of which comes from that previous poem. The larger piece is called World After This One, and it's a performance featuring movement and spoken word examining voguing, bomba, and gospel music, all as examples of how Black art forms rely on the materials of the present to imagine liberated futures. And this poem is an examination of the Reglamento de Esclavos, or the Regulation of Slaves, which was a document passed in Puerto Rico in 1826 after a series of slave revolts, essentially cracking down on the island's enslaved population and outlining this long litany of new rules and requirements to further subjugate Black folks and restrict their mobility in the hopes of quashing future rebellions and future revolts. So in this poem, I take a short section from the Reglamento and kind of break it down and reimagine it and reimagine Black liberation inside of it. This poem is called Deterioration. On leaving for work, each slave will be given the tool he needs for his activities of the day, and it will be collected from him and returned to the storeroom when he has finished work. On leaving for work, each slave, given the tool he needs for his activities of the day, will be collected and returned to the storeroom. Each slave, on leaving, collected the tool, returned to the storeroom, finished work. On leaving for work, each slave sang, Hallelujah, by and by. Each slave on leaving, by and by, returned to work as determined by the given tool. Each tool, by and by, collected from the storeroom, given work. Each slave a storeroom, saying, when I die, waited for work. The tool sang in the slave's hand, by and biding its time. Each slave sang, swing low, sweet chariot, swung the tool above his head. Each slave sang, steal away, by and by, stole a tool from the store, room above the slave's head, filled with what the slave sang. Each slave sang, estoy buscando un árbol, crouched behind the storeroom, waiting for the work. Work, slave, work. Shady place to lay down, by and by the riverside. Each slave a study, burdened and by. Each tool, buscando un árbol. What is the primary metaphor for freedom? Each slave sang, swing low and behold that beautiful shore, by and by, held the tool above his head, clenched his jaw, stole himself. Haven't got long to stay here, behind the storeroom. Hallelujah, held his breath and by. Each slave, tool in hand, leaving for the sweet, by and by, raised his hand above his head, by and by, waved goodbye and by and by and by, and clenched, and by and by and by and by and by and by, and held, and by and by and by and breath and by 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 and leaving and by 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 and returned and by 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 and waiting. Thank you all so much again for having me. I really appreciate being here. And shout out to all the artists, all the other poets on the mic tonight. I really appreciate being able to share this space with you all, even virtually. Thank you so much.
Welcome back, and thank you again to Benji Hart for the wonderful work and for getting us started this evening. As I mentioned earlier in the show, and as you may have seen in our intro, we're also partnering this month with Chicago-based nonprofit organization Awakenings to showcase a little bit of the incredible work that they're doing. Next, we're going to hear from their executive director, Laura Kincher, for a little bit about the gallery. And just in case you didn't know, Awakenings is dedicated to creating a physical and virtual artistic space in which to engage in an open dialogue that furthers awareness and understanding of sexual violence and promotes healing of survivors through the arts. Awakenings also publishes a digital literary magazine, Awaken Voices, as an avenue of creative healing for survivors who prefer to do so through memoir, poetry, essay, and more. The magazine is an outlet for survivors from all over the world to share their stories and be a part of the Awakenings community. We'll be sure to drop a link not only to the literary magazine, but also to the Awakenings Gallery website, so you can check it out for yourself. But first, we're going to hear from Laura, and after Laura, we're going to hear a little bit from essayist, poet, and writer Mary Cerney, and I'll see you after. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Kincher. I'm the executive director of Awakenings. And Awakenings was founded in 2010 by a woman named Jean Cozier, who had collected several amazing pieces of art, mostly paintings and some sculptures by survivors of sexual violence, and had a lot of trouble finding places to exhibit it, had trouble finding places that wanted to engage with that type of work. And she thought the art was so amazing and the stories were so amazing, and they are, that she wanted to create a permanent home for this type of art. And to this day, as far as we know, we can't find anybody else who's doing specifically this, showcasing art made by survivors of sexual violence. We're super, super proud. We have an amazing permanent collection from Jean, but now we have grown to incorporate tons of new artists, tons of new survivors, writers, performers, and it's been going really well. Not only is it a place for survivors to sort of gather and feel inspired by other survivors and feel like there's a dedicated place for them to tell their story, but it's also, the work is also educating the general public about the reality of sexual violence. I think when you look at a painting or a piece of art or read a poem by a survivor about their experience, I mean, it makes different parts of your brain fire off. It actually, the art acts as a window into what their suffering looks like. And that's not really an experience we can get from most other stories that are out there. So I think it's super impactful. I think it's a great way to educate yourself about the reality of this epidemic. You know, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men will be assaulted before the age of 18. That number is staggering, but nobody talks about it because we would rather not talk about sexual violence. But, you know, we have developed some really amazing different types of programming, literary being one of the most popular, which is why we're super excited about this event. The magazine really has a life of its own, has a community of its own. Some of the most powerful stories we get are through magazine submissions. Literary magazine is definitely a product of our creative director, Jerry Fredrickson's genius and hard work, and she has put so many hours into that magazine over the last several years. She has an MFA herself, and she has not only developed an amazing magazine that I think is brilliantly curated by her and our interns and a team of volunteer readers, but also the submission process she really sort of transformed over the years. So we understand obviously that when someone is sending us a piece of writing, it's obviously going to be very personal about trauma they experienced or just about the concept of healing from sexual violence, whether or not they identify themselves as a survivor. We have a whole team of people that work really hard to give kind of really sensitive edits so that we're not trying to change someone's story. And those edits are communicated often back and forth in a very kind of compassionate and very personal way. You know, I think that's one of the benefits of having a small team is, you know, we really want to forge actual long-lasting relationships with. We have, so we have a big, well, not so big, but we have a gallery, and there's sort of a main area, a little sitting area. And we understand that, you know, if someone walks into our space, they're going to be looking at art that is potentially triggering to them. And so we want to make sure that they have multiple opportunities to sort of step away from the art if they want to. So off to the side, we have a little reading room, and in addition to that, we have a space called the Breathe Room, which is sometimes used for actual therapy with like other therapists will sometimes rent the space. It just has, you know, like a couch. There's no artwork hanging in the wall. It's sort of a good sort of deactivated space for anyone to go in and process. And also all of our staff, I think all of us are trained in crisis de-escalation. So if we ever have a public event in person back in the day, if anybody did feel activated or triggered, you know, we would identify ourselves like, hey, we can act as your advocate. You can come and talk this through with us. We have resources available just to make sure we're being responsible. As responsible. Looking at any artwork or reading anything, or even just thinking about sexual violence can be very triggering. And there is little that we inside the Zoom world can do to affect how someone feels who's not right in front of us. However, as we sort of examine some of these pieces and listen to some of these stories, just take deep breaths. Remember to sort of stay in touch with your body. If you start to feel like something's tightening up, or if you're getting a little bit warm, or you notice that your brain is trying desperately to get you to look or think about something else, pay attention to that. We don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. So I highly recommend that you take a look at the resources in the chat ahead of time so that you know what's available to you. And at any point, if you feel strange or you feel the need to walk away, absolutely take a step away. You don't have to return. And I would encourage you to sit with yourself, just notice any feelings that are coming up, notice any sensations, notice any thoughts. So we have left Linda Ness's pieces up for a very long time intentionally. Hers, and there's a few other pieces from the Founders Collection that are sort of the best representation of what we do. And those pieces are really, they're kind of surprising because from far away, they almost look very cartoonish, very bright, colorful, childlike. And then when you get closer, you realize they're depicting some of them pretty graphic images of sexual assault. And I think those are really important for people to see because they tell a really impactful story, and the style is just such you wouldn't think that somebody would want to tell the story through that style and through those colors and how blocky everything is. But there's a couple pieces in particular that I think we got up close to. There's one of this sort of figure walking on a tightrope in between two, like almost looks like in between two tectonic plates. And there's a person kind of also walking on a tightrope behind them. And that's supposed to represent kind of what it feels like to be a survivor of sexual violence in a relationship, that no matter how much they care, how devoted they are, they're never going to quite reach you. They're never going to quite reach that, the way you feel, I guess. And it's a really sort of beautiful image, very evocative. And another, by starting conversations about sexual violence that wouldn't have otherwise happened, we are shifting that perspective just a little bit every single time. And that is how you dismantle the power of something. The less shame and discomfort we feel when it comes to talking about this, the more we can actually create a safer future for future generations. We're opening the lid of the container, that is keeping all this stuff behind closed doors and in private. And by exhibiting the artwork, we're not only helping survivors feel like something they create about this horrible experience can be beautiful and impactful and actually change someone's perspective, we're also teaching someone that, hey, you don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing all the time. You don't have to worry about, just hiding from these conversations. You can participate and you can learn, and you can do that by being empathetic and being curious. And I feel like viewing art just really softens some of our defenses and our stereotypes. And that's actually what our upcoming exhibit Return is about. We're inviting 4 artists that we've already worked with in the past to tell a new story about themselves, because survivors don't have a single story. We have this idea that a survivor of sexual violence is a woman in an alley who was drinking and maybe was dressed inappropriately. And it's like, that's just not what it is. That's not what it is almost ever. And trauma looks so different for everybody. And I just feel like we get sort of stuck in these ruts. And the more we can just be compassionate and sensitive to our environment and to our friends and our family, knowing how rampant it is, we can really, really make a change.
Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you to Exhibit B and our other readers, and especially thank you to Awakenings. I'm going to be sharing an excerpt from the book I'm working on right now, which deals with hereditary mental illness, dementia, and family trauma. So I'm especially grateful to have them in this space tonight and to be able to see the great work that they're doing. So I'm going to be sharing some erasures, some found poems, some fragmented poems, sourced mainly from newspaper clippings and an archive of court documents, which surround the death of this Irish woman who is a main figure in the book. And I use that as a means to re-examine the archive and memory and death. So thank you again and enjoy. Fuck's sake. First milk's foxglove extrication, piss-drenched, naked. Are you the wife of Michael Cleary in the name of God? Childless bitch, 26 years old. Clit snub pishog. Are you the wife? Are you the wife? Are you burned, buried, face shrouded in a sack, wearing nothing but black stockings and the left half of a gold earring, her bones and intestines protruding? In the name of God, it was only moonshine. Bridget met Michael in Clonmel, where she apprenticed as a seamstress, and they married shortly after. Folks like Michael took up any work they could, the memory of starvation handed down from their parents during the famine. He stayed in Clonmel for a job at a mill, while Bridget returned to Ballyvolia to live in a small laborer's cottage, a newly built block of home on a stretch of untended field. She bought a dog and some chickens, and for a single year, she lived alone. Maybe in that year alone, Bridget stayed up until the sun rose over Slievenaman, the mountain across the valley. Maybe as the morning bleached the sky, she leaned back on one of the wooden chairs, her legs propped up on the window. The rain bled through a crack in the pane and trickled down to the pocked sill. She held a cup of tea on her bare belly and watched the mountain peer out of the fog. They called it the Mountain of Women, and Bridget saw why. From her window, Slievenaman looked like a woman humming and stretched out on her back, her belly swollen with child. The plateaus of her shoulders sigh into the earth, heather flowering down her slopes. The mountain wraps herself in a white and purple cloak, and then burns it come winter. On the night we met, the shutters of the window were closed and the door locked. She was on her back, occupied by oath that no person would be standing by the bedside, the door over the mountain, the window of his hand across her mouth, I had heard the shout say, "Leave me alone," like liquid off a spoon. Leaves burned blank. Illness breaks the spine, cracks the ribs, murmurs foxglove. Bells tend the earth, unborn child, hushed, fevered, sheets folded in the cupboard. The moth dust wool, so bitter it warps the chestnut whorls. Silly woman, wayward threads. Here is not here, 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 is like brie melting on the stove. Earlobes flush and pressed wildflowers, weighted between Bible pages. Verses cut, patched over a ripped hem. Here's a word you know, but cannot taste in the evening, turquoise. Neck wilted in the boggy field. And here's a tune on the record player, singing of prairies you've never stitched. Woman, wretched, singing Oklahoma, beautiful morning. A whispered light sputtered on dry lips, sponge and ice chips. If you cannot sit up, if you cannot sit up, if you soil the bed sheets, Mother's Bible, names torn from cursive leaves. Dull knife in the drawer of the bedstand, symphonic tune easing shoulder blades. Needle shrouding evening. Speckle of walnut, oak, cherry tree, spoiled milk and lemon seeds. Woman twirls memory, her ring finger warped in wild berries. Woman died, body made dead, body made poem, on opal rings, on burnt skin, rhyming honeysuckle, on cavities, rotting jaws, untouched roots, unraveled threading, unmothered. I hum until teeth feel they will shatter from my jaw. On the oak floorboards at the foot of the stairs, my back, my fingertips pressed in divots of wood, waxy in the spaces between, water heater in the next room, fan clinks on the landing, cobwebs drift lazily across the banister. Choir blue, the mistaken stroke against the white ceiling, smacks of twilight, glass in brick alleys. The line crosses itself, and the consequence welts under the kitchen faucet, wires trapped between brass and doorbell, stare and scalp. The faint kettle, itched and rasped against cruel steel, blistering on the stove. The foundation, a slivered wound. Tilt or tip between the next land, light, cross-stitch, ire between air and faint spring. Extraordinary woman, sensation living, her night slept, nervous, her ravings paid, out of bed, dress drawn, being told her trace like wildfire, afloat where stories search her. Woman covered in evening, the body evening made.
All right, welcome back. Thank you, Mary Cerney, whose work we just saw. If you don't know, Mary is a poet who dabbles in nonfiction, collage, and trying to keep her houseplants alive. Although if you could just see a little bit off camera, you would know she sometimes struggles with the last bit. She's currently finishing her MFA in writing at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and is working on her first book, a hybrid genre project about family trauma, hereditary illness, and evoking the voices of those who've passed. Thank you, of course, to Laura from Awakenings, who we heard just before Mary. Please check out the Awakening links in the chat. They do awesome work. And finally, we've got two more pieces for you. The first is going to be a reading from Thea Matthews. Born and raised in San Francisco, California, Thea Matthews is a Brooklyn-based Black Indigenous Mexican poet and educator. She attained her BA in sociology at UC Berkeley, where she studied and taught June Jordan's program Poetry for the People, led by Aya de Leon. Her first poetry collection, Unearth the Flowers, was published June 2020 by Red Light Lit Press and is listed as part of the Best Indie Poetry of 2020 by Kirkus Reviews. Here, I've got it in my hand. Go check it out. She has work in the New Republic, Atlanta Review, The Rumpus, and others. Currently, she is an MFA poetry candidate at New York University. Like I said, new book out. We'll drop links to all her socials and stuff in the chat. Check her out. After Thea's work, we're going to see a video essay from Abigail Chabitnoy, and I'll see you after that. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Thea Matthews. I'm a poet and author, and the poems I'm going to be reading are from my working manuscript titled Americana. Justice, you blind? Or does this American tale melt your heart like wax of a faulty candle, barely flickering, eyes not made to see this? See what? White, a metaphor for power, exalted penises, devoted disciples, slave catchers, a waning heart like wax of a faulty candle, barely flickering, eyes not seen, Black Americans 3 times more likely to be killed by police, to be killed when asleep, to be killed unlawfully. Made to see this. See what? White, a metaphor for power, the danger, infested waters, the pen pillages families. Justice I pledge to unthread, stitches of power, rapists, these exalted penises, devoted disciples, slave catchers, a waning crescent moon, my smile, bounty over my head, I, blood of slaves, escape, founding fathers, ashes of burnt cotton. You see this moth-eaten cloth, this fabric drenched with semen, secrets, blood-stained fingerprints, whiteheads on a sheet of porous skin. Pop each one, use a sewing needle, or pinch until you feel the tips of 2 fingernails touch with semen, secrets, blood-stained fingerprints. Whiteheads roam this land, claim it their own. The conquest, a celebrated victory. Still, can you believe it? Whiteheads on a sheet of porous skin. Pop each one, use a sewing needle, gouge away, leave pockmarks, then call my lady, liberty, a blemished beauty, in the night sky, the moon afterwards, or pinch until you feel the tips of 2 fingernails touch, unthread seams of each line, an overthrow of founding fathers, repeated offenders, the bankruptcy of a 4th of July night. Oh, holy night, America, you got holes, gaping skin, an obstruction in the pavement between body and spirit. A woman told me the longest distance lies between heart and mind. I removed the plaster, laminating stripes, obstruction in the pavement between body and spirit. This pole of founding prayers drifts along a faint pulse of an eagle, with the tongue split in an instant, I am with you. A woman told me the longest distance lies between heart, needled and threaded. The first American flag sewn by a woman, the flag hung, the rationale for torture, in heart and mind. I remove the plaster, laminating stripes, the rain of white, the bloodstains fabric, the hair, the thread, to be a star of valor. Clearly one must kill. As much as I am ashamed of America, I long for her daily, sing to her in the night. I hum with my clipped native tongue. My cry bleeds to an ocean. The pupil in your eye, be centered in your persistence. Resist daily, sing to her in the night. I hum with my plucked eagle feathers. The flag laid on maple coffins, the flag raised, another lynching. Say their names. My clipped native tongue, my cry bleeds to an ocean. American taught school-bred children orbit the rifle, orbit the murdered, oscillating thin bellies salute the death. Quick, the pupil in your eye, be centered in your persistence. Resist the state, hemorrhaging from ships, shock, screams, echoes of bullet shot. Stop, listen to me. America, I too sing. Fear passes through nipples. I hate milk. My face is a face, murdered in a box, locked by a handheld gun, by terror, semen-soaked skin. My eyes, each body remembered. What resides in the lungs, seizes the breath, ravaged soul, a torn body, murdered in a box, locked by a handheld gun, by terror. We taught all black people, danger, white cloth with beady eyes seen underneath, the hero, ready to shoot, pour salt over semen-soaked skin. My eyes, each body remembered, what hangs in front of, what aches. This poem crashes into a room, Bible on the kitchen table, a bedroom full of secrets, resides in the lungs, seizes the breath, ravaged soul, a torn body, the curtains distrusted. Here lies America, the unlocked door to white, chains, fear passes through nipples. I hate milk. Slash each star, stare into each incision, state, district, settlement, revoked beneath the rocks. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, thought I had to die to live. I once was lost, but now I'm found, deep within a district, settlement, revoked beneath the rocks. The damned have been boxed. Liberty is liberty, not a euphemism for enslavement of the body. Now, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Thought I had to die, a slow suicide, in a country of commercialized politicians clamoring for attention. A torrent of abuse. I live to live. I once was lost, but now I'm found, deep within a trench, opening of an eye. What does it mean? An abolished state, a nation reconfigured. I cut straight. I am a river running through each heft of fabric. I am an echoing dream, tormenting white in still waters, a shallow night, the air thickened by revolt. I am on the edge, watching, waiting, time to strike. I am an echoing dream, tormenting white in still waters, between lips of Lady Liberty. The last breath rubs silence in between fingers until threads break waters. A shallow night, the air thickened by revolt, punched walls, throw away fractures, glare, I lean against the door, nonchalant, post-murder. To stars I am, on the edge, watching, waiting, time to strike. Fear burns the gut, threatens my voice, yet my feet move to the chant of my people, today, tomorrow. Together, we stare at a barren tree, by land seemingly untouched. The thing about molestation is that often one cannot see the internal bruising, the skin smooth. A calm river calms us, remains untouched. The thing about molestation is that often death is like death. A barren tree is like a barren tree. A summer's twilight precipitates veins of coral billows one cannot see, the internal bruising. Rape is like rape. An eagle soars across the sky. Its wings flap above a slanted pole, a sign to be brave, to feel the skin smooth. A calm river calms us, remains the beloved of stars, stripes with flames blazing from gut to mouth. God be with us as we rise. Thank you so much.
Chabitnoy, translation, salmon fisher. Michael Chabitnoy, Aleut, 1886 to 1920. Because they were of the water, because they were given Russian names, he was born with hushed words. Because his mother had a bad heart and his father was traumatized, they took him from the sea. Because he came to the school charitably before, because there is only one photo after, they told the skeptics, yes, it can be done. Because it could be done, because Indian marries white girl, because he died of consumption, there are words I can't say. Because he was survived by 2 sons, because they were called half-breed, because that second son took to drink, I've always been afraid of the sea. Because it doesn't mean salmon fisher, because I need to know I can say these words, because it means mischievous, energetic. Mischievous men and women fish for salmon energetically. Because he was an orphan, because in summer my skin turns redder than my father's, because they asked my mother, is she adopted? Because I too am of the water, because I hear these words, I will split my bones and fit my skin to the sea. I will shape my mouth to angle these words with the wind. Distance of articulation. When letters are lost, I think of you, Michael, alone, on a train and dressed as an ordinary parcel, an acceptable body, 15 years old, crossing the whole of America. My father, too, has always been drawn to trains. Did you make it to Carlisle with all your words, with your real voice, with all your teeth? 4,621 miles today, if by land, not counting each wave between woods and the Fox Islands. 3,034 if a raven flies. I'd like to believe you flew. Raptors too fish salmon. How do you think they got there, the fox? I'd like to believe you flew, and when your young boy wings tired over Pennsylvania, and there was no more salmon, they caught you and fed you and asked you for your name, and brought you home where there were others, and brought you home to listen. Boy, bear, bird, shark, fox, I can see something wild, Michael, a body poised to run. The only natural thing is defiant forward or back. Under scrutiny, what's behind your back? What was in your hands? Feathers, fur, or teeth? How soft the dear mouth, low the ground wherein a grave meets the second born. How did we come here, Michael? Where do we go? Did your mouth grow soft with age, Michael? Could you still chew the kimok, the little bones? Can you hear them breaking down? You can't spit a fish in the water and expect it still to swim. I am afraid to put my face under water, afraid of filling these lungs until the strain on my line pulls me under, mouth open. What's behind your back? It was winter. I was sweating. You and I were in a boat going back to Unalaska, and my body went cold to spite my discomfort. You can be wind. You can be feathers. You can be fur or fin and teeth. I am not even earth, not even bone, but permafrost in a warming state. Cold, not cold enough, porous, full of holes, not filled, but disappearing. It was winter, and I was sweating, the heat uncomfortable, expecting snow. I get cold so easy, my body forgets. I thought of you yesterday, again in the wind, going nowhere beside myself. What was the wind on Wood Island like? Could you walk the other way, Umnak or Unalaska bound? Did it ever blow you right where the world begins? Tell me, Michael, where the world ends, did you ever feel such wind again? April 10, 1909. Student Michael Chabitnoy went on an outing and did not return. In the current where drowning is beautiful, white breaks first, waves green, then black, shining seas, ships sailing, not sailing, what is still, wanting wind. It used to be no man could go against. This weather too will pass. The wind is not a river, and if a puddle at the last gives way to desert, corked bottle, walled city, veiled woman. Persephone, were you afraid? Kahwach tuknyuk. If air the conscious element, sometimes breath, sometimes bird. The last few days have been windy, but the current is strong, Nikifor, and it rains all the time. Tangirnaq Native Village. And sometimes, if I were not afraid, I am a fish with teeth after all. The word of the week is wave? How do you say a wave that eats people? How do you say a wave that consumes us? How do you say a wave capable of carrying us away? How do you say a wave is capable? How do you say a wave is culpable? The water's waking up. Kangyot ang tatut. Compounded by our fetch. How do you measure the distance between us and not us? You can't get big waves in a small pond, however hard or long the wind blows, but you can break a body of water open with enough change in the atmosphere. Still, a good woman should be fetching. That's what you told us. Bottle fetching in small vessels. Scarcity drives the market. Let me share with you my unbottled fetch, and let it be abounding. If a modest wind blows over, water uninterrupted for hundreds of miles. How do you say a people that is culpable? How do you say a people that is capable? Nuna ushnatuk. Heavy rains wash away a little, then a little more. Records tend to scarcity. Kayak miktok. Grandmothers, tell your granddaughters stories, how your grandmothers survived.
Hello again, and thank you to Abigail Chabitnoy for the beautiful work. Abigail is the author of How to Dress a Fish, published by Wesleyan in 2019. It won the 2020 Colorado Book Award for Poetry and is shortlisted in the international category of the 2020 Griffin Prize for Poetry. She was a 2016 Peripheral Poets Fellow, and her poems have appeared in Hayden's Ferry Review, Boston Review, Tin House, Gulf Coast, LitHub, and Red Ink, among many others. She earned her MFA in poetry at Colorado State University. Most recently, she was the recipient of the Witter Bynner funded Native Poet Residency at Elsewhere Studios in Paonia, Colorado. She's a mentor for the Institute of American Indian Arts MFA in creative writing and an instructor at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. She's a Koniag descendant and a member of the Tangirnaq Native Village in Kodiak. Thank you again, Abigail, for sharing your work with us. We really loved it. And that's going to be about it for this time. Thank you again to all our performers, Benji Hart, Mary Cerney, Thea Matthews, and of course Abigail Chabitnoy one more time. Thank you to Laura Kincher for speaking with us about Awakenings. Please check out all the links to all the stuff we checked out. More art for you to consume within those links until the next time. And let me thank one more time the Guild Literary Complex for helping us put these shows on. We couldn't do it without them. Our next one of these is going to be Thursday, March 25th. We do the last Thursday of every other month. So mark it down on your calendars. We'll see you then. And until then, stay warm.